Attorney General Eric Holder met with representatives of some major news organizations for the second day in a row on Friday to discuss possible changes to the Department of Justice's treatment of journalists in leak investigations. Meetings come after revelations about DOJ's probes of the Associated Press and a Fox News reporter, probes that involve seizures of private phone records and emails of journalists. Holder has said he recused himself from the AP investigation, in which the DOJ seized 2 months of phone logs of journalists last year as they investigated a leak about a CIA operation in Yemen. Last week, it was revealed that Holder had personally approved a search warrant for Fox News reporter James Rosen's private emails in 2010, after Rosen published a story the previous year detailing with details about North Korea's nuclear program. Not only that, the warrant even named Rosen as a co-conspirator under the Espionage Act of 1917, startling advocates of press freedom. Holder's meetings with members of the press this week were part of an internal Justice Department review ordered by President Obama. Many news outlets, including NBC News, declined to attend the first day of talks with Holder on Thursday because the administration said media outlets could not report on the contents of the discussion. Restrictions were relaxed on Friday, and participating journalists shared their reactions after they met with Holder.
We thought it was a constructive conversation. Good first step. They did talk about wanting to revise these guidelines and make some constructive changes, but now we've got to see what happens next, and will changes really be made, and will people feel less chilled about what's been going on?
TheRoot.com is reporting that Holder plans to hold more meetings on Monday with organizations that represent journalists of color and the LGBT community. The Native American Journalists Association has already declined the invitation because the meeting is off the record. Republicans say they are not satisfied with DOJ's internal review. Some are calling for an independent special counsel to investigate. Republicans in Congress have suggested that Holder may have perjured himself after he testified under oath last month that he had not been involved in any prosecution of journalists for disclosing government information. The Department of Justice responded on Thursday saying that Holder's testimony was, quote, accurate and consistent with the facts. That day, Texas Senator Ted Cruz became the latest Republican to call for Holder's resignation.
The degree of willingness of this administration to target a reporter for this network as an unindicted co-conspirator, I mean, that is without precedent. And unfortunately, I think it's part and parcel of a pattern from this administration of not respecting the Bill of Rights.
I want to bring in Crystal. She's the co-host of a show called The Cycle, which is like a Netflix or something.
It's on 3 daily. You should check it out.
Maybe one of these days I'll take a look. But thanks for joining us,
My pleasure.
Crystal. So there's this is a very obviously a complicated story. I'm glad we have a couple of journalists here too. But it seems to me that of the 3 sort of so-called scandals, Benghazi, I could say it's not really a scandal. The IRS thing, I think, is a complicated scandal that affects really an agency more than it affects the White House. And we have the AP and now Fox News issue, that is sort of the media First Amendment. This is the one that I think has attracted probably the least amount of public outcry, but it's the one that I think goes farthest up the chain. We've got Eric Holder right now personally signing off on a search warrant of a reporter, of James Rosen from Fox News, and a warrant that listed him as a potential co-conspirator. What Holder did there, I guess, it's not illegal, but it seems to be crossing there seems to be a line maybe that he's crossed there, Amanda, no?
I mean, this scandal really gets at sort of the heart of democracy, the First Amendment. And what troubles a lot of journalists is naming James Rosen, a Fox News journalist, as a co-conspirator simply for doing his job. I guess he was flattering his source and asking for information and saying he would like to break news. This is something we do every day. Really is essentially criminalizing journalism. And I don't know if the public completely understands the chilling effect this could have. When they open the newspaper, they won't hear what's going on. Think about, the administration thinking about getting into war or something like that. You won't get the same information if what was in the warrant goes forward. And I think Eric Holder is trying to now assure the media that he's not trying to criminalize journalism, but the scandal is really, really important to keep covering.
At last we can have a little disagreement around the panel. I tend to agree with Walter Pincus, who I think is the best national security reporter on this, in a couple of ways. First, if you look both at the Yemen disclosures and at this one involving North Korea, this is not whistleblowing. This is not reporters uncovering wrongdoing in government. In fact, these are really serious secrets, and what they did in both cases was to compromise the sources we had inside hostile governments or groups endangering their lives, but also blowing up our ability to follow what was going on in North Korea or with terrorist groups in the Middle East. So these were journalists acting as conduits for people inside government who were releasing the most sensitive secrets that really endangered American lives. And what Walter also pointed out is, and nobody has more experience than him, it was a relatively routine thing if you're going to get a subpoena of the records of James Rosen to call him a co-conspirator. Didn't mean you were going to charge him with anything criminal. It was a way to get at those records. And they were desperate at that point to find the mole inside the U.S. government and the intelligence agency.
So I think there is a lot of complexity here, but when I hear that argument that, well, they weren't actually going to charge him, they just listed him this way, you know, this is a search warrant application, and you're basically, by listing him this way as a potential co-conspirator, you are saying we could if we wanted to. We're asserting that power. Isn't that troubling that the government's even asserting that it's possible to be prosecuting a journalist this way?
I also think, though, as Walter said, you know, when you're talking about releasing the most sensitive secrets of the government, not because there's something wrong going on here or there's wrongdoing, but you're just acting as a conduit.
Just trying to get a scoop.
Trying to get a scoop.
Vanity, really.
And this wasn't James Rosen passively getting information. He was actively seeking this sort of stuff. There's a line where journalists can cross as well, and I'm not sure that James Rosen did cross that line.
And I agree with that, and I think the two distinctions that you're pointing out here are really critical and have been missed in a lot of the conversation. One is the difference between a leaker and a whistleblower, right? Both Rosen and Kim, the intelligence officer here, they were doing this for their own vanity, for their own, you know, career and prestige, to get a scoop. And that's entirely different from the Pentagon Papers, for example, and Daniel Ellsberg, where that really was a public interest, clearly. The other thing that you're drawing the distinction between is an actual prosecution of a journalist and a search warrant with a recitation. This is in response to the Privacy Protection Act of 1980, where in order to subpoena those emails, they needed to list him as an aider, abettor, or co-conspirator. Now, I get what you're saying. Doesn't that mean that they could? But we should also remember, journalists are not exempt from criminal prosecution, and the First Amendment does have limits. So let's say, this is maybe not the case in this particular example, but let's say that the North Korean asset that Rosen basically exposed, let's say that person had been killed. You know, let's say that their family had been killed. There is a line at which I think you could prosecute that journalist, and if there is a chilling effect on people like Kim, who are exposing national secrets that really are a detriment to our national security, I don't particularly have a problem with that.
Well, here's what I have a problem with that argument, and we'll pick this up after the break, but the basic problem I have with that is I don't automatically accept the premise that in either of these cases, whether we're talking about the Yemen story from the AP or we're talking about the North Korea story from Fox News, that vital national security was compromised in these cases. I know the claim is out there. I'm not willing right now to automatically accept it.